Good evening and welcome to this service of shadows, a quiet, reflective service for Good Friday. The service of shadows is patterned on a Tenebrae service. Tenebrae comes from the Latin word for darkness, and this is an ancient Christian service where accounts of the suffering and death of Jesus are accompanied by the gradual diminishing of the candles in the sanctuary. Tonight we'll hear the accounts of the crucifixion from the Gospels and also some resources from the Iona community and Nick Fawcett. Tonight is the darkest night in the Christian year, a night when the lights are dimmed and the sky feels dark and heavy, a day when theologians and poets feel as if a heavy veil is drawn over heart and mind. An inexplicably sad night. And we try to resist the darkness of the Easter story. In the grey light of early morning, after a night in the court of the high priest and denial by one of his own circle, Jesus found himself at the gates of the reluctant Pilate, who promptly tried to hand him back to the Jews. And though the sun rose that morning, the whole world turned black for the one who found himself without friend or helper. Faced with drinking a cup he'd prayed would be turned away from him, knowing that life was about to be drained out of him. We are invited to accompany Jesus through the darkness of Good Friday, to be witnesses to his suffering, to keep silence before his cry of dereliction. In our imaginations, let us trudge through Jerusalem until we come to the place of the cross, and then let us not turn our face away. On this, the darkest of nights, all that is asked of us is that we be present once again as the sacred story is retold, and to the amazing, mysterious, wondrous transaction that was and is still taking place. The shadow of betrayal. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Jesus answered, "You have said so." The shadow of the agony of the Spirit and arrest. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man, arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. The shadow of denial. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath, "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. The shadow of accusation. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the 2 do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. Simon of Cyrene, the shadow of crucifixion and humiliation. He was tired, just about dead on his feet, and it wasn't due just to the cross he was carrying. That might, after all, be the easy bit. It was the other burdens he had been bearing for so long, and the load he still had to endure. The cross was heavy, don't get me wrong. If anyone knows that, it's me. And the beating he had taken was enough to break any man. Yet I still say there was more to it than that. You only had to look in his eyes, as I did, and see the agony there. An agony not of body, but of soul. Not of flesh, but of spirit. When they hammered the nails into his hands and feet, when they hauled the cross, he scarcely flinched. But he was suffering, no question. Suffering more deeply, more hellishly than I'd imagined possible. It was as though a light had gone out within, as though he was being crushed by some extraordinary weight, as though he was enduring such torment that the physical pain seemed trivial by comparison. I was mystified at first, unable to imagine what could be more terrible than crucifixion. But then suddenly, just before he died, he looked up, his eyes bright, his face radiant, all sign of pain vanished. "It is finished," he shouted. And then I understood. He had carried a burden beyond all imagining. Almost, you might say, the weight of the world on his shoulders. And at last, having been faithful to the end, he could put it down, knowing the struggle was over. It is finished. We pray tonight for all victims of violence and cruelty, for those who have been violated, for those who have been harmed or abused, for those who have lost sight of the holiness of the human body and the value of human life. We pray tonight for those whose bodies are ravaged by illness, for those who live with chronic pain or fatigue or disability, for those whose bodies are failing and nearing the end of life. Come, Lord Jesus, light of all people, shine in the darkness. O sacred head, once wounded, with grief and shame bowed down, O kingly head surrounded, with thorns your only crown. How pale you are with anguish, with sore abuse and scorn. How does that face now languish, which once was bright as morn? We pray tonight for those who are in the midst of darkness, the darkness of poverty, the darkness of loneliness, the darkness of grief, the darkness of despair. Wherever shadows threaten to overwhelm, wherever they erode dignity or crush the spirit, wherever they hold terror or danger or hopelessness. Come, Lord Jesus, light of all people, shine in the darkness. What language shall I borrow to praise you, heavenly friend? for this your dying sorrow, your pity without end, will make me yours forever. And should I fainting be, Lord, let me never, never outlive my love for you. The shadow of burial. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. The door is shut now, and the world sighs and waits. And we wait in the night darkness, longing for the morning, longing for the light, for all who are waiting, for all who are longing for light. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer.